Let's be precise about what just happened, because the details matter and the government is already trying to spin its way out of this. In April, Donald Trump imposed reciprocal tariffs on countries around the world using emergency presidential powers. The UK was hit with a 10% rate. Starmer's team scrambled, flew to Washington, and came back claiming they'd secured a preferential arrangement, lower than most countries, a win for British diplomacy, they said. Then, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Trump's use of emergency powers to impose those tariffs was illegal. They struck them down. For a brief moment, it looked like the whole tariff threat might evaporate. But Trump doesn't back down. He never backs down. He signed a new presidential order reinstating global tariffs, and this time he didn't set them at 10%, he set them at 15%, the maximum allowed under a rarely used trade law that gives him 150 days before he needs congressional approval. Paul Ashworth, chief North America economist at Oxford Economics, called it, and I'm paraphrasing the Telegraph's quote here, essentially a slap in the face to the UK. Britain thought it had secured an advantageous rate. Instead, it got punished. And here's the critical uncertainty. British officials say they hope the new 15% rate won't affect the preferential arrangements Starmer negotiated on steel, cars, and pharmaceuticals. They hope. They don't know. The situation, in their own words, remains unclear. Hope is not a strategy. Hope is what you have when you've lost control of the situation, and that is exactly where this government is. But it gets worse, because while Starmer is scrambling, the opposition isn't just criticizing him, they're offering to replace him at the negotiating table. Robert Jenrick, Reform UK's Treasury spokesman, went on Sky News this weekend and said something extraordinary. Jenrick said Starmer should swallow his pride and ask Nigel Farage for help. He said directly and without hesitation that Farage would be better at negotiating with Donald Trump than Keir Starmer has been. Now think about the politics of that for a moment. The leader of a party with 5 members of parliament is being publicly presented as a more credible negotiator with the American president than the sitting prime minister with a majority of over 150. And the worst part? Most people watching this will agree because it's obviously true. Farage has a personal relationship with Trump that goes back years. He was on stage with him during the campaign. He's visited Mar-a-Lago. He's in Trump's phone book. Starmer is not. Starmer is the man who tried to ban Trump from entering the UK when he was Director of Public Prosecutions. Trump remembers these things. Jenrick also made another crucial point that got buried beneath the Farage headline. He pointed out that British industry is already on its knees, not just because of tariffs, but because of Labour's own domestic policies, energy costs, tax increases, regulatory burden. The tariffs are landing on businesses that are already wounded. Now stay with me, because towards the end of this video, I'm going to reveal exactly what the Americans are demanding from Britain in exchange for any relief. And when you hear the list, you'll understand why Starmer is trapped with no good options. Keep watching. So what is the government actually saying? Let's listen to Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson, who was sent out to defend the government's position on Sky News.
The interests of the local populations.
It is about a balance of rights. When people come to this country and claim asylum, we have a responsibility as a government to assess their cases and to process them. For those who have got a clear right to be here, for those who have evidenced what they are facing in terms of persecution, refugees, then that will be decided. Where they don't, then we will take action to remove people from the country. So we do have a responsibility to process those cases and yes,
and
to
the
provide
responsibility to those asylum seekers is more important than the responsibility to those who live locally.
Talks at the very highest level, an evolving situation, a nuanced approach. These are the words of a government that has absolutely no idea what to do. And notice who they sent out, the Education Secretary, not the Chancellor, not the Business Secretary, not even the Foreign Secretary. They sent the Education Secretary to explain international trade policy. That tells you everything about how confident they are in their own position. Nobody senior wanted to be the face of this disaster. Phillipson also refused to rule out retaliatory tariffs. That should alarm every single business owner watching this, because if Britain retaliates against America, our largest single-country trading partner, the economic damage will not fall on Washington. It will fall on British consumers. Higher prices, fewer exports, more factory closures, more job losses. And here's what the Americans are now demanding. This is the list I promised you. In exchange for any preferential treatment, the U.S. administration wants Britain to make concessions on chlorinated chicken, pharmaceutical pricing, and access for American tech firms. Chlorinated chicken. They want to lower British food standards. Pharmaceutical costs. They want the NHS to pay more for American drugs. Tech firms. They want access to British data markets with fewer restrictions. Every single one of those demands is politically toxic for labor. Their own voters would revolt. Their own backbenchers would rebel. Starmer cannot concede on any of them without destroying what's left of his coalition. So he's stuck. He can't retaliate, he can't concede, and he can't negotiate effectively because he doesn't have the relationship with Trump that would allow a genuine back-channel conversation. The William Ames Bain assessment from the British Chambers of Commerce was devastating. Higher tariffs are bad for trade, bad for consumers on both sides, and will weaken global economic growth. Businesses need clarity and certainty. They are getting neither. And this is where the whole picture comes together, because the tariff crisis doesn't exist in isolation. It sits on top of every other failure this government has delivered in the past year. Unemployment is rising, factories are closing, the steel industry is in crisis, car manufacturing is hemorrhaging jobs, energy prices, driven up by labor's own net zero obsession, are making British goods uncompetitive before a single tariff is even applied. Now, add 15% tariffs on top of that. British manufacturers who are already struggling with the highest energy costs in Europe are now facing a 15% penalty to sell into the American market. For some of those businesses, that is a death sentence. And here's the ultimate irony. Keir Starmer spent his entire leadership campaign telling the British public that the Conservatives had destroyed the country's international relationships, that Labour would restore credibility on the world stage, that the grown-ups were back. The grown-ups have just been outmaneuvered by a man who uses Truth Social as his primary communication platform. The grown-ups are being publicly told to phone Nigel Farage for help. The grown-ups sent the education secretary onto national television to explain a trade crisis she visibly didn't understand. This is not just a tariff problem. This is a competence problem, a leadership problem, a credibility problem, and it's happening in real time, with real consequences for real businesses and real jobs. Britain needs a prime minister who can pick up the phone and speak to the American president as an equal, someone Trump respects, someone who can negotiate from a genuine rapport, not performative flattery in royal letters. That person is clearly not Keir Starmer, and the fact that his own political opponents are offering to do the job for him is the most damning indictment of his premiership yet. So, let's sum this up. Trump has raised tariffs on Britain to 15%. Starmer's preferential deal is in serious jeopardy. The Americans are demanding concessions on food standards, drug pricing, and tech regulation that Labour cannot politically survive. And the government's response has been waffle, uncertainty, and sending the education secretary to explain trade policy. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage, the leader of a party with 5 seats, is being publicly identified as the person best placed to negotiate with the most powerful man on earth, because he has the one thing Keir Starmer doesn't, a relationship built on trust. This is what happens when you elect a government based on vibes instead of competence. You get crushed when the real world shows up. If you agree that this government is failing, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because these tariffs are just the beginning, and I'll be here to break down every consequence as it unfolds.